And he was able to determine that that plants were composed of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, NPK. That's what he brought. And what's important, I think, to understand is that for the first time in human history, life, biology, was dumbed down to a mechanical idea. If you look at the folklore and the mysticism surrounding, for example, the bubonic plague and diseases, and there was all this fairies and people didn't understand microbes. We didn't know about all those things, and so sickness and disease and life all had this very kind of mystical, unknown force behind them.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Labels. I'm Dr. Stina McCullough here with our favorite farmer, Joel Salatin. And today, Joel is going to talk about the history of chemical agriculture. So a lot of people ask us, like, how did we get to this place, right? How did we get where we're using chemical fertilizers and we're using pesticides and herbicides? And there's a lot of conspiracy around it. And Joel and I don't buy into that. So Joel is going to walk us through the history of how we got to this place of chemical agriculture, and he's going to provide us with some solutions. So take it away, Joel.
All right, Sina. Well, thanks. I like to start this discussion with one of my favorite books. It's called Arator, and it was written in 1818 by John Taylor, who was they call him John Taylor of Caroline. He served in the Virginia General Assembly with Thomas Jefferson. So he's a contemporary of Jefferson. They were friends. They actually lived fairly near each other. I mean, near within 40, 50 miles of each other. And he wrote a book in 1818. Catch the date, 1818, called Arator. Here's the way one chapter starts. Let us boldly face the fact our country is nearly ruined. and it's a chapter on how we've destroyed the soil. And I won't read any more of it, but it's just fascinating that in 1818 we had really great farmers, contemporary of Thomas Jefferson, saying, let us boldly face the fact our country is nearly ruined because we've destroyed the soil and all that. And he's very positive about how to restore the soil is with what he called vegetable matter. The word compost had not been invented yet. The word organic had not been invented yet. But what he used was vegetable matter. The word biomass had not yet been invented. So we've got a lot of words in our lexicon today that John Taylor of Caroline in 1818 didn't even have in his dictionary. And so he used just a broad term of vegetable matter. In other words, things that decompose. That was his solution. Well, another guy was working on a solution as well, and his name was Justus von Liebig. And he was an Austrian chemist who was trying to solve the fertility problem. There was a truly massive fertility problem, as we just saw from here and as well as in England. And remember, about 1825, they found all that guano manure on the islands, the desert islands off of the coast of Peru. And so in 1825, they started mining that. And, that was a multi-century buildup of cormorant, booby, and pelican bird guano that was sometimes 100 feet deep. And it had accumulated because it was desert. And so it never rained. So all these birds, they roosted there. And over the centuries, it built up 100 feet deep. And so Great Britain actually got most of it. The U.S. got a little bit of it, but most of it was steamship. Think about this. It was steamship hauled from Peru to Great Britain using Chinese. That's where we started the word coolies, Chinese coolie labor. In fact, the working conditions were so terrible that a lot of the Chinese laborers, I mean, think about it. They were hand shoveling manure 100 feet deep down slopes into these ships docked nearby, that some of them just got so whatever desperate that they actually flung themselves off of these cliffs into the ocean and died. These Chinese coolies. So, my point is that especially here in the West, in the developed countries, there was a panic going on as to how to maintain fertility, and so there were, you know.
Can I interject right there? So you're saying that way back in 1818, there was this fertility problem. Where
Right.
did that stem from? Were they tilling? Were they like destroying the topsoil, or
Yes.
where did that originate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All of the above. All the above. I mean, if you read again, you know, farmers from in the late 1700s. This is where Go West, Young Man, Go West developed. They were constantly looking for new lands, virgin lands, because growing tobacco and cotton, and just the farming methods, they just destroyed the land, and especially growing grain, especially with tillage, and so they were constantly looking for new lands to put into production, and so the idea of wearing out the farm, wearing out the land, was very, very common. I mean, that was just farming wears out the land. I mean, there was no thought, except, I mean, obviously people like John Taylor of Caroline. He took a contrarian view and said, no, we can restore it. We can restore it with vegetable matter, and we can do this. But generally, farming was considered land degenerative. And of course, if you study, civilizations in history, that has been the trajectory of great civilizations in history. They start with fertility, and they end in, erosion and lack of fertility. So it wasn't new. It was just that, at the dawn of this was the beginning of the industrial age. The steam engine was developing, and there was mechanization was starting in. I mean, you had the Luddites, you had the hand weaving was being replaced by looms. I mean, that was a huge step, and that technology created new opportunities for urbanization, factory. I mean, Charles Dickens England, was 1820 to 1860, 1870, and so that's the period we're working on. It was this early time, and people were very concerned about, well, how much more land can we find? How can we get something to keep it? So Justus von Liebig, the Austrian, his motives were very pure. He was trying to figure out how do we field a burgeoning world population, and all this was, if you know your history, was stimulating the work of a guy named Malthus, who had this that we were going to populate ourselves out of food, and we're all going to die, and the Malthusian hierarchy of human need.
But
and so
you're already seeing, right, similarities to today, right? These fears still carry on.
Yes, absolutely, very much so. In fact, if you study the century cycles, here we are in 2023, and we're talking about the period of 1820. So we're two cycles, and I would argue that the other cycle then was World War I, which was about 1915, 1920, and so if you study centenarian philosophy, and see these century cycles, yes, I think we're definitely right in that same sequential, a century. There's a reason why that's such a big deal throughout history. Well, anyway, Liebig used test tubes. For the first time, they were able to pull vacuums, and he was able to determine that that plants were composed of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, NPK. That's what he brought. And what's important, I think, to understand is that for the first time in human history, biology was dumbed down to a mechanical idea. You know, if you look at the folklore and the whatever the mysticism surrounding, for example, the bubonic plague and diseases, and there was all this fairies, and people didn't understand microbes, and we didn't know about all those things, and so sickness and disease and life all had this very kind of mystical unknown force behind them. Some of it obviously was considered to be divine. Some of it was fairies. Some of it was a hex. That's why you put the hex on your Irish door to keep the bad spirits out. So there was all this spiritism in. Well, suddenly, Justice von Liebig dispelled all that. He said, it's not spirits, it's not mystical stuff. It's just nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. That's what it is. All life is simply a rearrangement of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And this, of course, worked very well to the burgeoning kind of mechanical industrial revolution that was starting about the same time. I think it's important to realize that in 1837 is also the year Cyrus McCormick brought the reaper to agriculture, which is the official start of the Industrial Revolution. The Cyrus McCormick's reaper was the official starting of the Industrial Revolution, because that got rid of the scythe. And up until then, grain had always been harvested by hand with a scythe. Suddenly, we had a machine to harvest it, and that's the official beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So I think it's amazing that we had von Liebig working in Austria, showing that life is mechanical, while Cyrus McCormick was working here in the U.S. to bring the most technological advance in agriculture mechanically at the same time. I'm keying on this mechanical because it's gonna play out as we go forward. So then throughout the 1800s and into 1870, 1880, people are working on how to mine, refine, and all NPK. By 1850, all that Peruvian guano was mined out. It only took them 25 years to mine out millennia of this guano, and so suddenly that came and went, and meanwhile the Industrial Revolution is going on apace, and things are moving forward. Then we have World War I. Well, interestingly, we make explosives, ammunition out of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. That's what we make bombs and explosives out of. So I want us all to appreciate that World War I, that the war effort massively funded the technology surrounding NPK development, and so the war effort funded the mining, the refining, the marketing, and the distribution of NPK, and brought the cost way down. And then you have, and meanwhile, farmers are shoveling. In fact, I think like 1910 to 1915, a lot of the urban editorials and newspapers are writing about the demise of the city. The cities were getting bigger and bigger, but with draft power, they couldn't stay ahead of the poop. The horse poop, the mule poop, all this stuff, and there was poop everywhere. And 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 so the automobile literally saved the city from being covered up in poop, and plumbing saved the city from its sanitation privacy, from sewer pipes to indoor plumbing, to be able to take a bath more than once every 2 weeks. All of those things came in, in 1910 to 1925 rapidly. Streetcars, I mean, all of those things developed very rapidly right then. Again, it was a century turn, but it made livable cities, which could exceed anything that history had ever had before, because cities were always held in check by the fact that you just couldn't move fodder and poop and sewage, into and out of the city, except unless it was so big. So here we are. Then we enter World War II, and World War II, of course, moved us in the same direction, more war effort into NP and K. And so what I want to just have us focus on is post World War II. Okay, so think about all the farmers as they sent their sons off to war, World War II, and dad's expecting the sons to come back and help him on the farm. So 1946, 47, a lot of these sons are dead or injured, and a lot of them don't want to come back to the farm. And dad's sitting there, he's now in his 50s, and he's been hand shoveling all of his life, shovel. And he's presented, hey, you can put this bag of 10, 10, 10 on your field, or you can continue shoveling. So I always come to this point to try to help people to understand, look, don't crucify grandpa. You and I in the same position, chances are we would have taken that little bag of 10, 10, 10 chemical fertilizer rather than shoveling at 55, 58, 60 years old. We would have done the same thing. So be gentle, be forgiving on that, and realize that the people that developed Norman Borlaug and the green, all that stuff, to pull nitrogen out of the atmosphere, all of those things, they were sincere-minded. These were not nefarious, evil people. They were trying to protect humanity, to feed humanity, to make fertile soils long term. That's what they were trying to do.
Thank you for joining us on Beyond Labels. Our mission with this podcast is to make it accessible to everyone.
But we are behind a paywall because the issues we discuss are often subject to censorship. We've run into that, and so we have an extremely modest paywall to let us have the freedom to discuss the kind of issues we want to discuss in the way we want to discuss them. And you can become a member and enjoy all this content by clicking on the description box below. We look forward to having you join our family.